Hi there, Lindsay here, the Frugal Crafter. Today I'm going to share something different for Sketchbook Sunday. I'm actually taking a course on painting figures, and I decided I would be showing the work that I'm doing for that class for the next few Sketchbook Sundays. So we have to work from our own photographs, and I am not a great photographer, and I don't have a lot of photographs of people, so I went through my camera roll and came across this picture I took of my daughters, so I thought this would be a great one for me to do for the class. So I sketched it out on newsprint that was bigger than the watercolor paper that I planned to use, and sketched it with a pencil, and then went over the lines that I wanted to keep with a ballpoint pen, because pencil on newsprint just doesn't really get that dark, and I was having a hard time seeing my lines. So I basically just traced over the lines that I thought were good enough to keep. I like sketching on newsprint because it's so inexpensive that you don't have to worry about making a mistake. You can always grab a new sheet if you need to. And then I transferred that using a light box onto my watercolor paper because I didn't want to have a bunch of erasing on my watercolor paper, and I wanted to make sure my sketch was good. Now I'm just filling in a few of the lines that looked a little light and making sure I have everything that I need. Now I didn't have a painting board handy big enough to tape this paper down to, so I taped it down to the back of the newsprint. However, I quickly realized that that was just not thick enough to do the trick, and after getting some washes on here, it was really buckling, so I sprayed and wet the back of my paper and just stuck it down to my Teflon mat. That would even out the tension so I wouldn't have a warped paper to work on. And then I just very lightly blocked in colors. I wasn't sure what I was going to do for the background, but I didn't want that big tree in between them, so I just kind of freehanded in a little bit of a landscape here with a pond and some faraway trees and some grass. I really didn't know where I was going with this, but it was early enough on the painting process that I didn't have to worry too bad about messing it up. After drying that initial wash, I realized that I couldn't stand at my table and keep painting because it was just too awkward and uncomfortable. I really needed to be working upright for a picture this size, and I had the wet stuff done so I'd be able to work upright with the viscosity of the paint that I'd be using. So what I did was I actually just tacked up the painting to a display that I use in my craft fair, so it worked really well, and then I was able to kind of layer on some washes for the dress. Now I'm going to be moving the camera from time to time as you know, as I take breaks and whatnot, because I worked on and off on this through the course of a week. In the class that I'm taking, he kind of lectures for a while, gives us a technique that he wants us to use, and then sends us home with an assignment. So I kind of just picked away at this as I had time throughout the week. I used a mixture of quinacridone red, yellow ochre, burnt sienna, and ultramarine blue for the skin tones. Other than that, I also used some cad yellow deep for warming up some of the colors in Maisie's dress. So I used a quinacridone red on its own for Lila's dress, and I added a little bit of the cad yellow deep for Maisie's. And you know, just kind of used those colors throughout. I did have some Van Dyke Brown, mostly because I'm using my M. Graham palette, and it was on its side in my painting box, and it kind of oozed into the mixing area, and I'm like, oh, that's a nice dark brown, I'm going to use that. So those colors are what I used for the duration. I like to use a yellow ochre, burnt sienna, ultramarine blue, and then some type of pink or red for my skin tones, but that's just me. You can obviously use what you think is best, but I find that even if I'm going to do a darker skin tone, I can add more blue and brown and get those richer, darker shades. So for me, it's just a really nice combination to use. Oh, and don't mind my hot mess hair, no makeup face, and grimy old sweatshirt, because that's typically how I paint most days. The hair doesn't get done unless I am going somewhere or going to be on camera. But anyway, so I just went through and just started layering and building up shadow and really looking for shadow, because there wasn't a lot in the photo, so I really had to kind of look for it. Put the details on the sandals, and added, you know, more shadows and folds of fabric, and, you know, just tried to give the fabric the structure that it had. Maisie's dress was crocheted and kind of loose and flowy, and Lila's was satin and more structured, so I thought it was kind of also a nice metaphor for their personalities. So I decided I needed something darker to contrast because everything was so pale, so I put in a skinnier tree than what I had in my reference photo. I grabbed some of my Julie Nutting color pencils. They're the water-soluble skin tone version from Prima, and decided to use those to kind of tweak the colors in the face and the hair, basically because they were such small faces to work on. I didn't have a lot of room to get in there with the brush, and when I went in with the brush and then softened a shadow, I ended up would pull up too much paint, and it just wasn't going the way I wanted. So the pencils really helped me control the amount of shadow I was using. And my instructor does not mind the use of Chinese white. It was actually on his supply list, so I decided to take advantage of that and use some Chinese white to give the skin tone a little bit more reflection in the highlights and just a little bit more solidness, I guess. And I decided to extend the tree down a little bit because as I got looking at the picture, I realized that that's way too far away from her. It would need to be down almost level with her feet or closer to that if she was leaning on it. And one of the reasons I put the tree in, not only for the contrast I needed, but because she was tipped too far. And I didn't notice that in my sketch, but once I started painting, I realized she was leaning too far back for both of her feet to be in front of her like that. If her foot was back where that other fold of the dress was in the back, it would have been fine. She would have balanced herself, but I'm like, she'd be tipping over at this point. So the tree had to go in there. She had to have something to lean against, or it would be very unsettling to look at. So here I thought maybe I would darken the background, and I did go into the water with a little ultramarine blue, but I chickened out. I didn't do enough. I should have made it darker, but I was just kind of at this point a little afraid of messing it up like the day before I had to go to class. So I didn't want that to happen. I grabbed those handmade watercolors that I made in my handmade watercolor video, the gold, because they both were wearing some gold jewelry and Lila had gold sandals, and I decided to do that with a gold paint. Now my camera, a couple files didn't make it for some reason. I used some absorbent ground to paint in some paint in some large poppies in the front, and I let that set up, and now I'm going over that with watercolor because looking at the picture, I was just feeling like it needed something in the foreground. It was just too flat. So I figured by putting in some flowers, and I took these photos in my sister's garden, so I didn't cheat, or it's all my own photographs. Cheat according to my instructor's assignment. So I did that so that I would have something that was light and fluttery, kind of like their dress, using the same colors as I have been using, so kind of like the colors in their dresses. I thought it would just give a nice feminine touch to this painting and help it, make the greens look a little nicer, having that pink contrast, and also kind of help repeat the colors and textures of the fabric of their dresses, and just, make it more cohesive and more interesting, and give your eyes a place to travel through the painting. And I did decide to grab some colored pencils because by this point I've actually gone to class, come home. I had the absorbent ground down when I went to class, and I'm like, sorry, it's not done, but this is as far as I got. So now I'm just finishing up the colors, and I am using colored pencil because it's my painting at this point. The class is over, that assignment's done, and I thought it would be fun to just kind of build up some colored pencil and maybe see if I could push this painting a little bit further, because honestly I still was a little disappointed so far with how it was coming out, but I just think it was a matter of it not feeling finished yet, and I didn't feel like using more watercolor on it was going to give me the results that I wanted. That texture on the dress, it showed it briefly in the video, but I didn't mention it. I had painted watercolor on a piece of burlap, and I just stamped it down to get that little texture on Maisie's crocheted dress, because obviously I couldn't paint the crochet detail because it was too small. At this point, I was thinking I was done, so I removed the tape, and then I took a look at the picture, and I actually set it up on my easel and just kind of looked at it for a bit, and I realized that the painting seemed way too heavy on the right-hand side, and I needed to do something on the left-hand side. So I decided to mirror the tree by putting some branches in on the left-hand side of the painting, and then I used my wedge brush to paint some little leaves in there, and there we have it. That is the finished picture. I hope you enjoyed this video. It was a lot of fun to work on this painting throughout the course of a week and just keep coming back to it. It was really challenging. I definitely don't think that it I have so many improvements that I would make if I did it again, and I think that's good. I think you always need to be pushing yourself and challenging yourself to make better paintings. So I'm going to show you a still shot of the painting finished, and I hope you enjoyed this. Please let me know in the comments below. Give me a thumbs up if you liked it, and until next time, happy crafting!